Peace be upon you. Today, I bring you a story that baffled the detectives in the Dubai police at the time because it's truly strange. The incident happened in 2010, specifically in the Old Naif area in the heart of Dubai. One day, a report was received about the presence of a dead body in the middle of a well-known company. Security forces were immediately mobilized. This happened in the morning, meaning that the employees who came to work were the ones who discovered the body. When the detectives, forensic team, and criminal evidence unit arrived and examined the body, it turned out to be the body of the company's owner, a well-known and wealthy Asian businessman. He had been murdered, and the murder took place in his office. Someone had struck him on the head with a sharp object. Since the employees discovered the body early in the morning, it's clear that he was killed either that day or the previous night, meaning during the middle of the night. This confused the detectives because they wondered why the businessman was at the office late at night or why he hadn't left the previous day, as all the employees had gone home. The fingerprints were collected, and all the employees and workers in the company were prevented from leaving, as they were questioned on site. After the body and fingerprints were taken, they checked the doors and windows to see if there had been a break-in, but no, there was no sign of forced entry. The killer must have known the businessman and had likely arranged a meeting with him, taking advantage of the fact that the businessman was alone and killed him. It was also found that many valuables were missing, including items from the businessman's office, his wallet, some documents, and various amounts of money, though not large sums, just some cash he kept in his desk drawer. The interrogation with the company's staff began, and the detectives called in a security force to monitor the building and the workers until the investigation was completed. From morning until the time of the noon prayer, the interrogations continued. One by one, they asked, "Where were you? Give us your details. Where do you live? What is your relationship with the businessman, the owner of the company? Are you close to him? Are you one of the workers who has access to him, or not?" Not everyone had access to the businessman, as there were different levels: workers, administrators, accountants, etc. During the investigation, one of the workers, who was also of Indian nationality, managed to slip past the security officers during questioning and leave through the company's door. The officer noticed and said, "Let him go, keep an eye on him. Let him make this move, maybe he will reveal something about himself." Until that point, they didn't know who had killed the businessman, and there was no clear suspect. They said, "Keep watching him." Two detectives followed him to see where he would go, and they saw him heading toward the mosque next to the company. They followed him in and, sure enough, he was praying the noon prayer. They prayed next to him to make sure he didn't try to escape, without disturbing his prayer. Once he finished praying, they grabbed him and said, "You were not supposed to leave the company. We informed everyone that there's an ongoing investigation, and we are in the middle of a murder investigation. This is not a trivial matter. If you wanted to pray, you could have done so inside the company. Why did you leave when we told you not to?" As soon as they confronted him, he broke down inside the mosque. The other worshippers were looking on, not understanding what was happening. He began crying and shouting, by God, that's it. I'm in the house of God, I'll say everything. I confess." He was clearly tense, scared, and had tried to escape earlier. Seeing that there was no way out, he decided to confess, saying, "I did it. I killed him." They took him back to the company and brought him before the investigator. When asked why he killed the businessman, he said, "Because he treated me badly, and I took the opportunity when the company was empty of workers the previous day. He was the last one there. The day before, the company was empty of workers, and he was the last one there because he had some work to finish. So, I went to him, and while he was distracted, I struck him with a sharp object, stole whatever I could, and went back to the workers' accommodation. The next day, I returned to work after making sure the other workers arrived before me and had already discovered the body and reported it to the authorities, so no suspicion would fall on me." He was referred to the prosecution, where he confirmed his confession. Later, he reenacted the crime at the scene, and a full report was written about the incident and sent to the court. In the first trial, he was sentenced to death. Now, here's the shocking part. The case didn't take long to reach trial, as it was a criminal case. It didn't even take 2 months. During these 2 months, the criminal was begging the detectives, the prosecution, and the court to let him use the phone to call a family member in India. He kept pleading, saying, "Please, just 5 minutes, let me make one phone call." But they told him, "No, you haven't been sentenced yet, and this is a criminal case. By order of the prosecution, you're not allowed any visits or phone calls." They told him, "Once you've been sentenced and transferred to the central prison, you can then request a phone call." During those 2 months, the company's management and accountants discovered that money was being withdrawn from the company's account after the businessman's death. Someone had access to the company's bank card and was making frequent withdrawals. The accountant noticed, "How is this possible? We had frozen everything because the owner is deceased, and we're waiting for the case to be resolved. So, who was making these withdrawals?" Only the businessman had the authority to access the account. They reported this to the authorities, saying, "The man was murdered, but someone is still using his bank card." The detectives immediately launched an investigation, tracking the withdrawals through the banks and ATMs. They retrieved surveillance footage from the ATMs and street cameras, and eventually identified the individual. They arrested him, and it turned out to be one of the businessman's regular clients, someone who frequently did business with him. They were shocked, wondering how he got hold of the businessman's bank card and why he was withdrawing money even after the man had died. When they caught him, he immediately confessed. He, too, was of Indian nationality. The authorities asked, "What is your relationship to?" He said, "Honestly, I stole the bank card that was in his wallet after I struck him with a sharp object and killed him." They asked him, "What do you mean?" He replied, "Yes, I killed him and stole some money from his office and his wallet, which had the bank card in it." Inside the wallet was a piece of paper. The businessman was an older man, and he had written down some numbers on that paper. "I realized one of the numbers was the PIN for the bank card. There were also other cards, but I didn't find them in the wallet." The story wasn't just about the money or the bank card. They asked him, "How did you kill him?" He explained, "I killed him on such and such day, like this and that," and he led them through his confession. They asked him, "If you really killed him, where did you hide the sharp weapon you used?" "That's the only thing we didn't find at the crime scene," after the first suspect confessed, claiming, "I killed him. But when we asked where the weapon was, he said, 'I don't know, I threw it away because I was scared, and it wasn't found at the company.'" However, this second person led them to the location of the sharp weapon he had used to kill the businessman. He had thrown it on top of a nearby building, confirming that he was indeed the killer. This shocked the security officers because the first suspect had confessed, reenacted the crime, and gave us this whole story. He even confirmed his statements to the prosecution and court, and he was sentenced to death. So, why did he confess if he was innocent? They began to investigate further, suspecting that maybe the first suspect was an accomplice. They interrogated the second killer, trying to find any connection between him and the first person who had confessed to the crime. But it turned out there was no connection, no communication, no relationship at all between the two. Now the authorities were confused. The question wasn't just about the second person, they needed to go back and reinvestigate the first suspect. Why would he confess and take responsibility for the crime if he was innocent? Was he trying to protect the real killer, or was there another reason? They said, "Okay," and went to the first suspect, the one who initially confessed, in the central prison. Every time he met someone, he would say, "Please, just let me make a phone call. Please, I beg you." After receiving permission from the prosecution and with the order of the prison director, they arranged a meeting between the detectives and the first suspect, who was still on death row, as the appeal and cassation courts had not yet ruled on his case. When they met him, they said, "We want to question you again about the same case." He responded, "I don't mind, but please, just let me make a phone call." Even the prison administration had mentioned to the detectives that he was constantly bothering them, asking to make a call as if he had something urgent to tell a family member or someone close to him. They said, "Okay." When he asked for the call, they said, "We don't mind, we'll let you make the call." They arranged for the phone call and brought in someone who spoke his language fluently, as India has many different languages, such as Malayalam and Urdu. They wanted someone who could understand his dialect clearly. During the call, they wanted to hear what he was going to say. They already knew he was innocent, but they were curious about the secret behind his confession. When he called his family, he quickly told them, "Contact so-and-so in Dubai and tell him that I took the blame for the real killer. I don't know him, but the reason I confessed is to protect the treasure hidden inside the company. He should go to the manager's office and dig beneath the desk. There, he will find a large box like a chest containing 300,000 dirhams. Once he takes the money, he should inform me that the job is done so I can change my statement and tell them I'm not the killer. At least then I can try to prove my innocence, but only after I'm sure the money has been secured." The detectives were shocked when they heard the call and had it translated. They arrested him again and said, "Are you stupid? Why would you confess if you're not the killer? Why did you cause all this confusion and complicate the case? All of this just so you could buy time until you could inform one of your relatives to go to the manager's office, dig under the desk, and take the box where he hid his money." He began crying and said, "I endured all this suffering, the interrogation, the humiliation, the prison, and being moved from place to place, just so I could get the money. And now, they've discovered everything. They responded, yes, we found out through your phone call, you fool. And by the way, the detectives are currently at the company and are going to verify what you said. Indeed, the detectives went, and it turned out that the manager, the businessman who owned the company and was also Indian, did have money in the bank, but sometimes he needed cash on hand to run the company. He would hide it under his desk in a pit he had made. Just as the first suspect had said, there was a box with a lock containing 300,000 dirhams. The first suspect knew about the money because he had seen the businessman take it into his office and had been watching him closely, noticing when he went under the desk to hide it. The company wasn't the type of place you'd imagine, a regular company. It was more like large warehouses, and the company director had his own private office. They dealt with heavy equipment parts and other such things. This suspect just wanted to make a phone call so his relative could steal the money while he was in prison and had already confessed to the crime, so no one would suspect him of taking the money from the manager's office. After ensuring that his relative had taken the money, he planned to change his story and say, "No, I'm not the killer." The authorities were puzzled about how to classify this case. This man had been in prison for 2 months, and although he was innocent, he wasn't involved in the murder or the theft. He had simply attempted to steal the money but failed. To cut a long story short, the innocent suspect was released and deported from the country. The real killer, who had confessed and accurately reenacted the crime, was arrested, especially after they found the murder weapon. And that's the end of our story. Take care and goodbye.